Hey guys, welcome to another Football Scoop Online Clinic. Today we've got Lane Peterson, the wide receivers coach at Kaukaunee High School in Wisconsin. He's going to be talking about some practice planning and staff structure stuff. So, Coach Peterson, take it away, man. Floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Really appreciate you obviously getting the chance to be able to do this. I know most of the clinics and pieces that we kind of have going on are really schematic based. This is not going to be one of those. I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on how we organize practice, how we reach the game planning points, and a lot of those organizational tools. So my hope is that anybody out there can maybe take something I can create a little thought provoking, a little piece in your mind, and hopefully find some organizational pieces to maybe you can take away. So first one, I just do want to show one schematic clip. The clip on here, I'll see how good this one actually goes through. The big thing I'd really like to kind of have everybody pay attention to is just the action of this specific play. Try not to pay attention to the scheme. Try not to look at it being inside zone gap, whatever it is. But I just kind of want to talk about the action on this one and um, how nice everything just kind of flows. And I think this is, throughout my experience, this is one of the big pieces and really good examples of what I've kind of been able to learn and see. One of the best things that I think of any offense is being able to be multiple when things look the same. So this is a really great example of, having your run action, then you have a pop from a tight end, you have a bubble action that you can run off the jet, you can run your regular jet sweep, you can throw nows to both sides, and being able to basically run or do 5 different things out of the same type of action, I think is really, really important. Again, I know it's going a little bit slow for you, but hopefully you kind of get the gist of that. Just having that play versatility, I think, is really important anytime you're looking to assemble any type of offense. So just a little tidbit there. Just kind of an introduction of what I kind of want to talk about a little bit. So organization, I think that's one of the most critical parts of being, a coach in any type of position, is being able to organize, whether it's your room, an offense, a defense, a special teams, or an entire program. I think a lot of those concrete methodical pieces are really, really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff that I've learned, some stuff that I'm interested in. And then we're going to move into maybe a little bit of pre-planning stuff, practice, and then how we take that and translate that towards, a game type environment. So I think the biggest thing that we really want to kind of look at anytime you're conducting, either it's an audit or starting a new program or something like that, is looking at your resources, understanding what are the constraints that you have in any particular position. The biggest one is going to be time. We don't have an infinite amount of time. There's always time over the course of a game, over the course of the week, practice each day, and being able to identify how much you have so that way you can be efficient and manage that well, I think is incredibly important. The next one's going to be space, equipment. You can throw like financial stuff in there as well. You really want to kind of know what you all have. Do you have 2 fields to be able to practice on? How many footballs do you have? How many different pieces of equipment? Obviously conducting that little audit before you kind of start making your plans. And then the third most important resource is the number of people. So how many coaches do you have? How many players do you have? Do you have enough to be able to run 2 sets, 2 scout teams, things like that? It's important to kind of look at that type of stuff. One of the biggest, I think, struggles right now, in whether it's a business setting or really any type of team environment where we have goals, is people want to have their cake and eat it too. And I think that's something that you really kind of got to be able to look at. There's always going to be that little give and take. So I think it's important to kind of identify those things and figure out, hey, this thing's really important. This thing might be a little bit less important. Not that we don't care about it, but we have to put a little bit more of a focus on that. I always like to kind of look at things in terms of a flow chart right here. I think that's the easiest way to really have true innovation, is being able to start at the top. What is the one thing you want to be able to accomplish, and then kind of break it down from there. Anytime you're thinking about scheme, or I know when I'm thinking about how do we get this specific person the ball, right? If you're trying to get a specific athlete the ball, there's only 3 ways to be able to get them the ball on offense. You throw the ball to them, you hand it off to them, or the snap comes directly to them. That's it. And then you kind of work your way down from there and figure out, hey, what are the next couple steps? How can we maybe do some things a little bit different, create some misconception to be able to get a guy the ball? Very, very similar there. This is probably the biggest piece that I strongly believe in, is prioritizing practice. I think that there's a lot of really good pieces out there that kind of talk a little bit about this. I think practice is the most important part of, the program. It's 85% of the time that you're spending out on the field. Obviously, you have all the preparation pieces, but that practice, that's what kind of leads into the game. And I think that's really important. Sometimes I think a little bit undervalued. Every minute of practice is incredibly important, and being able to manage that time and prepare in a really good way, I think, is incredibly efficient to being able to get the job done. I do want to give a shout out, and hopefully Doug can be able to do this. Doug's got a really, really good article that came out like exactly a month ago. I'd highly recommend everybody taking a look at it. It's called A System for You to Take Back Your Weekends. And how Doug kind of sits there and uses Slack and other technological channels to be able to improve communication and how things are working. Really recommend kind of checking out that article. It's a really, really good piece and kind of a foundational thing that I think can really help us, especially in a time like this where we're all kind of stuck at home. We're trying to use different mediums to be able to learn. That's a strong piece that I would probably look at. I think there's so many resources out there that can help us learn and help us improve, whether it's articles, obviously online clinics like this, which is really, really great, pieces on YouTube, Twitter, um, audio books, things like that, podcasts, and being able to take advantage of all that type of stuff to be able to gain information is really, really good. Um, I know one of the biggest things that I do with that, a lot of people write notes in their phone and use their memo and stuff like that, which I think is great. I would recommend, this is just a little tip that I picked up a couple years ago. I'd recommend looking into the Google Keep app versus a regular memo. The Google Keep app allows you to sit there and type out your stuff, but then it goes right to your computer. So you have it on a cloud-based server. You can copy paste and put it in the notes. That's something I really like to do. Any football idea or concept that I think of, I put it in that Google Keep, then I eventually transfer it into another form on the computer. It just makes things a little bit easier. So with that prioritizing practice, I think the biggest thing that is kind of undervalued that a lot of coaches kind of could do a little bit better job of is defining roles. And I try to think of football in three different terms. I think of it as your prep work and your planning, your practice period, and then your game day stuff that you want to be able to do. And this is a piece that I've really kind of found during my time at FAU. We were very, very detailed about thinking about all of the different possible things that could go wrong, all of the different possible things that we need to have happen. And being able to understand those things, whether it's, game plan related, practice related, game related, understanding those responsibilities that need to be done, and then identifying them and giving them to a specific person. And this is something I like, this style of format, because you can add to it. This is just an example of something. Obviously, there's 100 different, ways of being able to do this. But I think being able to identify this type of stuff is really important. I know at Kaukaunee High School, we didn't have very many managers last year, so we had to have a lot of coaches that wore those roles of being able to get equipment out and film and things like that. So being able to identify who's going to do all those roles, that way when everything kind of blows up at game time or right before the game, you kind of know where everybody stands. So I think defining roles in these three specific areas is really important. There was another coach that I talked to from Florida a couple days ago. He has all of his coaches in a coach's manual that kind of identifies all of that type of stuff up. We need to have explicit expectations of what we want. And that's something that we continuously have to learn. Every year, you're going to discover that one new thing, just like you learn about that new situation or that new thing to practice. I mean, I think about right now, imagine that kick six in the Iron Bowl a few years ago. I'm sure most people in the world are now practicing that situation where you have a missed field goal, so that way you don't end up like Alabama did. That's one of those situations that it happens one time and has a trickle down effect, I think, on the entire football community. So we're going to kind of get into some game planning stuff. I'm going to kind of start with my core beliefs behind that, but we're going to kind of move forward there. So the big things that I really strongly kind of think about is any offense really needs to have different options, just like any program needs to be able to have different options. There's a lot of different ways to be able to succeed. There's a lot of different perspectives, and I'm not going to say most, but a lot of them work. Whether it's your grounded pound Wisconsin style offense, you're going to dominate time of possession. Be incredibly efficient with your time. You might not score as many points, but that's their philosophy. And all of that trickles down offense, defense and special teams, and you can see that kind of in the way they operate. Then maybe you look at the no huddle up-tempo style offense. You're scoring 40, 50 points a game. Your time of possession isn't going to be as high. Obviously, maybe your defense is going to spend a little bit more time on the field. I would hope if you're looking for those explosive plays, then you're also explosive in trying to create situations in the kicking game as well. So making sure that all sides of your ball, all sides of the ball reflect your core beliefs, I think are really important. With that, your personnel and staff, make sure that those guys, I mean, you need to put people in positions where, guys can be fit to be able to do those responsibilities with those core. And I think this right here is probably one of the most important pieces to having your core beliefs. You constantly need to be able to evaluate, hey, if we're going to be an explosive offense that's going to sit here and score incredibly quickly, or we're going to have 40 points a game, we have to set smart goals in order to evaluate whether we're actually achieving that. I think the worst thing that you can have is whatever your core vision is or your core goals are, you reach a point where you don't have a way of being able to evaluate that, and then you kind of get lost. And I think that's where you start to go over the hill and start going down the wrong side of the mountain. So I think that's something to be aware of. A lot of the guys might remember these days back in Madden. I know it's a little bit overcomplicated now, but I'm talking like Madden 2005. That's the one with Ray Lewis on the cover. We'd go through, you'd have your season, you go 19-0, you're playing on pro. You have 106 touchdown passes, 6,000 yards, and you go through those team stats, right? And you're number one in all these 10 categories, and you flip to that next page in special teams or turnovers or efficiency, and you're 32nd in that. That's, I think, a big thing, especially in terms of statistics and analysis, because it's so overwhelming at times. If you're going to be tops in one category, you're probably not going to be very good in another one. So if you score a ton of points and you have a lot of explosive plays, chances are you're going to be one of the worst teams in red zone field goal percentage because you don't get in there and kick very many field goals. And that's just an example, but I think there's a lot of statistics out there that, you have to kind of make sure that you know what your core beliefs are first, and then analyze, hey, maybe this is a little bit less important. And I think we can get caught up sometimes in that, in a lot of different areas with some new statistical analysis pieces that are out there. I'm a stats guy. I love stats, but numbers aren't everything. Numbers should be there to check understanding and maybe use some to predict the future. But the best advice I can give, and I'll kind of get into this a little bit later, like, you need to use statistics and numbers that you understand how they work. You understand how they are predictive. Sometimes less is more. And I'm a little bit of a strong believer in that in terms of a lot of things. So make sure you kind of know what direction you're going in terms of that. I think overcoaching is the greatest epidemic in football. I think that there's a lot of coaches out there that are teaching, really specific, intricate ways of being able to do this and do that. There's 50 different ways on how to be able to catch a football properly, right? And I think sometimes we fill, a kid's head with that, and there's so much thinking and so much going on, it doesn't allow him to play fast. I think another struggle with, and I know I'm guilty of this, is overcoaching in terms of talking about, we all want to be experts in some area. Okay, we want to demonstrate that, hey, we know a lot about this specific situation or this specific concept, so we try to talk about it. We talk about it. We talk about it to kind of try to boost ourselves up a little bit, to make ourselves appear to be experts or seem to be experts. There's a reason that some of these guys, some of the best people at what they do, not everybody's like that. There aren't 100 Lincoln Rileys out there. There aren't 100 Paul Johnsons out there. Everybody kind of has their little niche. And the best thing that I think we can do is really just, hey, what is the goal? Catch the ball, throw the ball, run the ball, score. Like, offense and football in general is becoming so much more about simplicity, and overcoaching, I think, can be a real struggle. We have those goals that we talked about before and those beliefs. I think everything needs to be focused towards that. And if it's not helping us, the little intricate pieces, I'm not saying details aren't important. I think that they are. But we need to be careful that we're not overloading a player too much. So they're thinking too much about how I'm holding my hand, how I'm doing this, how I'm moving that. That I think is a really important piece. I think with a lot of these different types of things that we're learning right now, and especially in a time like this, we're trying to learn how to improve our balance. We're trying to keep people fresh with nice energy. The work-life balance term, I think, is a big one that is getting tossed around right now, and people are wanting to be more efficient. The old days of working 16 hours in the building right now, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think we're looking for more um, innovative ways of being able to improve, especially at a lower level where you just have less resources. I think a lot of the really great things we learn at the college level, and especially the small college level, are kind of working their way up, and we're seeing a lot of those people be successful because they're learning from a lot of their smart pieces that they're kind of figuring out. I touched on this before about the resources, but identifying what maybe traditional practices we don't have resources for. If you don't have a big team, right? Maybe having a scout team is not the best way to go about it. I talked about another coach with this, yesterday, and we were kind of bouncing back and forth on if you have a smaller team or maybe your twos really aren't as good, even close to as good as your ones, then how much good is it to sit there and walk through to teach them the scout team? You go out there, you play against your ones, but they're at such a lower level than maybe the competition that you're going to play. Is it going to be worth having that scout team? That's something I think that everybody needs to kind of weigh in on. Position coaches. I know at the high school and college level, sometimes you don't have enough coaches, right? That's a real struggle. I've been a part of that before. And I think a lot of times we have that thought of having a position coach to be able to run that specific spot. But so much work nowadays is done where the quarterbacks are with the receivers, the running backs are with the receivers, the tight ends are with the O line. You know, you have those sessions where groups are working together. I'm not so sure that having a position coach at each spot is necessary. So I think trying to find ways, again, given the resources that you have to be able to bridge those gaps is really important. This is a big one I've gone back and forth on, grading players, because it takes an incredibly large amount of time. And I've tried to figure out, hey, is this something that's worth doing? Do I want to sit there and grade out the right tackle? He sat there and played 90% of the snaps, and he graded out at 84%. And then the backup guy went in, he played 10 reps and he graded out at 95% because he's playing against lesser competition and playing less snaps. How do I justify that to those kids? That's something I've gone back and forth on. And again, I think looking at where your resources are at, I think that's something else that kind of should take some thought. This is the final one, extras. This is a big piece that I've kind of come to learned a little bit about over the past few years. When you're having success, especially at the high school level, everybody wants to be a part of it. We had a lot of people that wanted to come and wanted to be a part of the success that we were having with the team, which I think is great. But I think it's really important to make sure that some of those people that want to come in and be a part of it, they're not part of the nucleus that you had, the core group of guys. And keeping those roles identified for those dudes, I think is really going to help when that situation arises, because everybody wants to come in and help, but then you got 15 cooks in the kitchen talking about what's going on right now. So that's something that I tend to be a little bit more cautious with, is bringing on new coaches as like playoff coaches. That's something I've seen, and I've been kind of a little bit nervous about being in that situation, because sometimes it just feels like people are trying to come in and take over. All right, so I talked about this a little bit, data, and I think it can be incredibly overwhelming because there's so many different things that you can do. Huddle is so customizable, and there's so many different pieces and things that you can do with it. It can be it's just a black hole of stuff. And if you don't take the time to really figure out what those core pieces are that you need, I think it can be a really, really difficult position to be in. And people talk about how great data is and how great analytics are, but being able to look at, hey, what are the couple things that are important, and identifying your headings group that you're going to sit there and use for a specific situation. So I've got a headings group I use for self scout. I've got one that I use for opponent scouting. And honestly, it's not that long. It's not that big. And most of it is the data that you're going to use, whether you're tagging a game, using the Huddle Tag a Game feature, or you're using Huddle Assist. Trying to find those methods that are going to work with the information that you get is really important. Again, I talked about having an explicit method. You really need to look at what is important and what isn't important to you. Every individual person is different, and having that organized and written down in a way that everybody can see, can use, I think that's really the first step in kind of keeping all of your stuff cleaned up. The other tip that I'll give about huddle, anytime you're working through your huddle data, go before the season and make sure that you're going through all of the possible values that you have and then lock those values. I know we struggle with this formationally. You sit there and you get 1,500 different trips formations because you got one that's all caps, you got one that's all lowercase, you got the one that says trips left, trips right. Locking those values, that way all of your data can be concise, correct, and in the right spot. So I'd definitely take a look at that. Now we're going to kind of get into the game plan piece, and I've got this, from some of the other coaches, and I think this is really, really brilliant. All of the different pieces that go into calling a play, right? You got down, you got distance, you got field position, score, time, personnel. Those are all the different pieces that are going to impact you as you're calling a play. This is a really, really good piece, identifying those groups. And again, I think this is a huddle piece in here that I would kind of recommend looking into. You're going to have your tempos, your personnel formation, shift in motion, all of the different kind of changers and structures that you're going to have. The run game, you're going to have your inside game, your outside game. Your traps are obviously going to be a part of the inside stuff. You're going to have your pin and pull. It's going to be part of your outside stuff. And then your option game, whether you're a triple option team, an old school triple option team, an RPO team, you have that way of being able to organize that data as well. And then pass game wise, a good coach that I've kind of listened to splits it up into 5 different ways. And I've really kind of identified with this one. And I think this is a great way to be able to organize your data in these 5 groups. So this next slide is just going to be kind of some information that I took from our last season to kind of go through and conduct a real strong self audit, right? So over the course of last season, we had 671 relevant snaps, okay? And it takes a little bit relevant. I took out things like pre-snap penalties. Obviously, if you have called timeouts, you don't want to put those in there. And then snaps towards the end of the game where the game's already out of reach. Don't need to count any of those types of things. And then organize all of the different plays and pieces that you had to see how often you're in these situations, how often you're running these specific plays. This is going to give you a good background. So that way, when you get to the practice portion, you can sit there and say, hey, we're running inside zone 200 times over the course of the season. That better be, how often we're sitting there and practicing inside zone. Learn those percentages and figure out those. This is another one, just an average piece of it. 16, 17 times a game we're running inside zone, okay? So the bulk of what we're teaching and what we're doing over the course of practice should be working on that inside zone scheme, and that's going to help you organize your way a little bit more. I think this is a really, really good way of being able to look at, hey, what are we actually doing here, and is this something that we're actually practicing? Here's the same thing, but just with situational play calling. I'm a strong believer, as I think most coaches are, that situational excellence is the key to really being a successful football team. First and 10, most popular down in football, being able to understand your base core plays that you want to be able to run. Second and 10 is the next one. Okay. And there's a lot of, I think second down is the one where I think a lot of people are really kind of learning a little bit more about and looking into it, because we're starting to figure out, we want to be in third down and short rather than third down and long. I think getting out of third down and not being in that thing at all, that's the best thing you can possibly do. So really learning about second down. I've created a second down report because I'm really interested in learning about how we can be better there to not hit that third down threshold. This also kind of identifies, hey, how often do we really need to practice red zone? Okay. If red zone is going to be, we run 7 plays in the red zone, how much time do we need to dedicate to that? I think red zone is a really, really talked about popular area right now. And I think it's important, but also being able to identify, hey, how much are we in the red zone? How much are we in the goal line? So that way you're not sitting there and practicing 2 days on goal line, but you only run it 2 plays a game. So being able to identify that to, again, structure your practice well, I think is really, really important. Everybody's going to have their different perspectives on scouting, right? Your different thoughts, your different things that you're going to look at. That's all going to be kind of dictated by you and your philosophy on how you see everything. I think the biggest things that I believe in is you need to be able to have the threat of run and pass out of each formation and personnel grouping. Now, I think another piece to it, I strongly believe in being able to attack the whole field horizontally and vertically. There's different ways of being able to get the ball to people, and I think that's the biggest key that you can kind of learn from maybe that flow chart innovation thing that I talked about a little bit earlier. Um, I think a lot of other people have came to the conclusion that having different formations is maybe a little bit better than having different plays. Learning those core rooted plays and being able to identify different formations of those week to week, I think is a really strong way of being able um, to get back to your core stuff and have success. One of the biggest pieces that I took away from um, a now Scott Frost at Nebraska, but looking at one of his UCF practice plans was learning that they had a walkthrough and an entire team period just dedicated to going over formations for that week. They would still run their inside zone, their gap schemes, and their quick perimeter screens, but they would be working on the different formations that they would be using each week to be able to get to that. And they dedicated specific walkthrough periods and team periods just to trot out and try out those new formations and get the guys acclimated to that. So I think that's really, really important. Delegating, I think this is one of the hardest things of any coach or coordinator's job. Create situations where you have coaches that Iowa uses the term critical experts, right? And put them in those areas. If you have a guy who stares at the offensive line the whole time and he's the offensive line coach, I mean, I feel like he should be in charge of the stunts and the fronts and things like that. Giving coaches tools to be able to do their job is not micromanaging them. It's allowing them to use those tools. Okay, and I think sometimes we get a little bit confused because we want to give freedom to coaches, but offering them tools to be able to say, here, this is kind of what I'm looking for. Let's do this job, and then they can kind of put their own spin on it. And obviously you can handle that at, you know, in a specific basis. Um, the focus that we all put on the players, I think sometimes it's a little bit forgotten that focus needs to be put on our coaches as well. We need to position coaches to be able to do their job and have an efficient time. And that way they can do things that bring value to everybody. It keeps them motivated, gives them specific responsibilities, rather than everybody just kind of standing around and not sure what to do, which I've unfortunately been a part of that as well. So we're going to kind of walk through some of the practice stuff. This first one, this first kind of perspective is a little bit maybe oriented towards high school. I was talking to a couple coaches the other day, and we were talking about the concepts of the walkthrough, right? Walkthrough has basically infiltrated for football safety reasons the NFL, and it's now seeping into high-level college football, right? Walkthrough periods, I think, are so critically important because they really allow you to be able to go through exactly what you're saying on the field, move around. And we were talking about whether walkthroughs are, whether that's worth a little bit more time than film is. And I think both of us came to the conclusion that we'd say it might be. When you're getting in there during film and a practice meeting, you have to have those cut-ups prepared. If you're walking in and we're still, you know, scrolling through an entire game film, I just feel like it's kind of a disservice to the players because we don't have anything planned and prepared for them, and it goes back into that time portion, which I think is really important. Coaches, coaches watch film. We know what we're kind of looking for. We organize in ways that we're kind of looking for, but from a player perspective, how many times when a player is going and watching film on their own, are they just watching highlights? I think that's kind of a piece to maybe look into a little bit, because do players really know what they're kind of looking for and how to watch film? I know a lot of us would say, yeah, we teach them how to be able to do that. But when they're on their own, what do we find is going to be a better use of our time and their time? Spending time watching film, maybe inside. And again, I'm not saying cut film out entirely, but I think exploring the walkthrough phase is something really, really important, something that we used, at FAU that I really, really enjoyed. I'm going to kind of get into some practice plan type stuff right now. A couple general pieces to maybe be able to look at. How many days do we have in our work week? How much time do we have? And then what are the parts of that practice that are going to lead up to the game? Again, that flow chart mentality, kind of looking at what we had. This was an example of one of the Mondays that we would have earlier in the season when we were down at FAU. And again, if you guys want copies of this type of stuff and, just want to chat, feel free to give me a shout. I'll give you my contact information at the end of this as well. We had a regular install day on Mondays towards the beginning of the season. Once we got down towards the end of the season, we shifted a little bit, and Coach Kiffin wanted to give guys rests on their legs, so we moved to something more along the lines of this. We'd start with our OD corrections, then we move into more of like a walkthrough style practice. And I think this was really good. It helps saving on the legs. And it really, really focuses a little bit more on the mental game. And obviously, I think you get a little bit more done when you're organizing stuff and you're out on the field in that walkthrough type setting, longer meetings, things like that. Um, I think if you have access to the AFCA digital library, I'd strongly recommend checking out Coach Dan Casey's presentation there. He'll talk a little bit about his weekly practice plan, and I think his is a little bit similar to this. I love what he's got going on too. It's a really, really good applicable way to be able to learn some more stuff too. You get into your regular Tuesday install day, big heavy stuff that we kind of have going on. We always believe Coach Kiffin wanted to be able to have a move the field, a 2-minute alive type situation, not live, but like an unscripted period towards the end of that practice. Okay, so we put 1:45 on the clock. You're down by 3 balls on the minus 29-yard line. You had 2 timeouts. We have to be able to get in and score, kick a field goal. I think those types of situations really can help because that way players are prepared. They're used to being in a spot where, hey, we're down 3 points with a minute left on the field. We're kind of we know what to do. We're not overwhelmed by that moment. This was a normal Wednesday for us. Again, this is the walkthrough day. So we have our team sessions that we're going through our scripted practice, all of that type of stuff leading up to more red zone time. Again, walk through, kind of pay attention. This is just going to be shorts. So it's a nice, smooth practice, easy on the legs, not overly intense. And as you can see, an hour and 4 minutes is all that one is going to be. So it's not too bad. I think a lot of people have seen kind of the Fast Friday mode. Coach Kelly at Oregon kind of organized that and started that a little bit more. You have your fast practice, full speed, everything's kind of moving. You're doing all of this stuff is done on air. So you're just sitting there and working down the field. After this period, once you finish up with these teams, and this is all going to be move the field, you continue with your substitution script. So this is an example of one of the ones that we used for us. So you go through all the various situations that can incur on that. I think this is a really, really good way, again, to prep people, to get your guys ready, because the biggest thing that players need to have during the game is knowledge of what to do in given situations. This is one of those things that it's easy. You can put it up on the board, 30 seconds left, whatever the down and distance is, and keep that going so that way your guys know what situation, what to do in that specific situation. As we kind of get into the game day stuff, this is probably the area that I'm still trying to learn the most about. I think that anytime you talk to different coaches and how they're able to organize their days, how they're able to figure out, hey, what roles do we want everybody to kind of have on game day? I think that's so different, and that's easily the biggest piece to kind of learn how people are operating in that sense. I think we have chances of being able to learn, I guess, a couple recommendations of guys that I would maybe take a look at. Again, I talked about Coach Casey before. Coach Kaukaunee from Buffalo is a really, really good one to listen to. He's got a couple presentations out there. And my favorite guy right now is Coach Drinkle from Army. He's got some really, really good stuff. Kind of a lot of the pieces from this have kind of been thought-provoking pieces that I've gotten from him. So I would maybe take a look there. Those are a couple different guys to maybe take a look at and see what you can learn from them as well. Again, game day pieces. This is all about defining roles. I think you have to be able to understand and think about what the concrete things that we need to have going into a game are going to be. Everybody's going to have a play caller. You're going to have your signaler, your personnel guy. I think those are some pretty standard pieces. We use our backup quarterback to be able to chart the game. I think it's a good way of being able to keep him engaged. He's constantly with our offensive coordinator, so he can see and hear what's all kind of going on there. A setup coach, that's something that I've kind of taken the lead on a little bit, is we have somebody up in the box who we have a specific chart that I'll show you as well, we're working through, we're running, whether it's a bubble or whatever our concepts are, our quick game concepts that we have setups off of, for that coming game. Hey, are we still getting the bubble? Hey, are we still getting this? Are we still getting this? And then when we reach that point of bam, yes, we're going to be able to go over the top. We can get this on the double move. You have a coach specifically looking for that. We can call down. We can have that information readily available, because that's where those explosive plays are going to come from. Um, running as a lead from the box, this is my favorite part about this, is it's a way for you to be able to check your understanding. Hey, have we done a good job in our game planning? Have we figured out exactly what this team is going to do? Now, if they do something completely different, there's not really anything that you can control about that. But have we prepared in an efficient enough way to be able to see, yep, this is what we thought that they were going to do, yep, this is what they are going to do? This is one of the pieces that we use up in the booth. Our halftime report, um, have this brings it down, and again, most of this information for the guys out there that use Huddle, most of this I just kind of steal from Huddle, bring it down. Our offensive coordinator is able to check it out over the course of the halftime. We talk about it for a couple minutes, and we get in with the guys and kind of talk about what's going on with them. I think this is just a sample of something that can be a nice tool to be able to use. um, and again, if anybody's got other ideas, I think that there's so many great points out there, but any tools that you can do to help make things a little bit smoother, I think, is the way to go. This is another one that we use, so our drive summary. So there's a couple different ways to be able to do this after each drive. um, our running backs coach and I will sit here and kind of go through this. Everything is just kind of labeled for a different letter, so that way you can call down, hey, double A6, A4. That way you can kind of get that information done, as quick as possible. I think that's a really good way of being able to do it. Sometimes it just comes out, hey, first down efficiency, we were 3 for 4 or 1 for 2 or whatever it was. But that way, being able to organize that information in a way that we can get it down to the offensive coordinator. And sometimes it's really nice to have those tools on the sidelines, that our offensive coordinator is really, really focused on trying to be visual. He likes to be able to see things in front of him rather than just kind of hearing things. Sometimes you get in that mode where you're listening a little bit, and you lose track of what's going on. If you have like a visual piece that you can get down there, they can look at, hey, this is where we're at. Okay, I can remember to do it this way. I think that's a really, really valuable piece, in addition to the hearing different pieces. Um, the formation chart is another one that I use. Um, Basically my game planning tool that I like, being able to organize to go through this, say, hey, third down situations, this is what we're going to get out of 2x2. This is what we're going to get out of 3x1. Organize however we kind of see it. And that way, when they get out on the field, you can obviously identify, hey, um, yep, this is exactly what we thought we were going to get. We have, the middle field is open right now. We can hit them on that post route, or whatever, combination or situation you kind of see. I think those are some significant pieces of being able to do it. Again, I think a lot of this is dependent on how you game plan and what your style is, right? And when it comes down to game planning, the biggest things are going to be, what do they take away? What do we do well? What do they do well? And being able to attack, those different kind of components to it. I think there's so much overcomplicating of how things operate, how things work, but being able to just boil it down to the three most basic things that we need to know, I think um, that's at the core root what game planning really needs to be, what football needs to be. Focusing on those simplistic small things, because I think it was Coach Warren Year who said, he's got one of my favorite pieces that he talks about, thinking that if your feet are moving, or if your head is spinning, then your feet are not, right? So being able to be as simplistic and um, as organized as we possibly can, and then being able to pass that information to the player, I think is really, really critical. Because in 2020 we put so much pressure, and I'll be the king of sitting there and saying that, putting pressure on players and teaching them, hey, this is cover 2, this is cover 3, watch for this quarter, half. If you get that, do this. um, I think that there's something to be said for being able to understand a lot of that type of stuff. um, but if that's not something that um, there's a point of diminishing return, is I guess the way that I would say it. There's a point where when you have all of that knowledge, eventually it's going to get in the kid's way, where he's not going to be able to think about all of those different types of things, um, and be able to go out and do his job at an effective level. I kind of talked about the setup chart as well. I think this is a good thought to kind of be able to work into. And this changes, our base concept changes each given week, and how we want to organize that. You're going to have your double moves and pieces like that on the back end of it, so you're going to get to kind of see, hey, this is how this plays a role. One other thing I just kind of wanted to talk about, the different pieces that we use, the different cut-ups. I think most people use, your regular cut-ups, but I wanted to go through our list. We go through 1st and 10. We go through 2nd down, small, medium, large, extra large. Just like I think most people do. 3rd down is the same. The 4th down situations, your red zone, your goal line. I think one of the biggest questions in the world right now is where does the red zone start to? Right. And the red zone starts whenever the defense changes. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not like a number of, hey, at the 25-yard line, that we consider that the red zone. At the 20-yard line, we consider that the red zone. Looking at it from an offensive perspective, when does that defense change? When do they stop doing what they normally do in their base coverages and in their situation and change to their, you know, however, maybe they just sit there and they play zone the whole time, and then they get into the red zone and bam. In high school, we get a lot of man. We're a 2x2 team, so we get a lot of man when we hit, the red zone. And again, it changes. Was it the 20-yard line, the 18-yard line, the 25-yard line? So being able to identify when teams click over into that area. We also look obviously at the explosive run and the explosive pass. Ours are going to be 12 for an explosive run and 16 for an explosive pass. I think that's an arbitrary one, whatever you kind of feel is important on that specific piece of it. Let's see. I guess the other main piece that I kind of want to talk about in closing a little bit. I think a lot of times we look at football and we're all scheme junkies, right? We're curious about what is happening and what this new play is and what Coach Riley is running at Oklahoma. I think we can take that curiosity and really find ways of being able to be organizational curious as well. How can we use mediums like Zoom or Google Drive to be able to make ourselves more efficient? I think those are some of the questions that we can start asking, and it's really going to lead to maybe a more successful area. Because just because we see, a great concept or a great play, we might not have the personnel to be able to do that. But practices and schemes, like I think there's a significant point of being able to explore and learn about both. So I think those are some areas to kind of look into as the future, holds for all of us. If anybody's got any questions, obviously shoot me a follow on Twitter, and give me an email. I do have a lot of kind of stuff that I've accumulated over the years from talking to a lot of coaches in terms of practice planning and things like that. The biggest thing I guess I would take away is, use that flow chart mentality of thinking. Understand what is the problem that I have here, and then what are the components that kind of make that up as we come down. So thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach Peterson. I got a couple questions here for you.
Yeah, man.
The halftime report and the drive summary.
Yeah.
Is that stuff being filled out by the actual coach in the box, or is that kind of a support staff guy?
Yeah, so right now I'm kind of playing the role of support staff guy, coach in the box. Like we have 5 coaches on offense, so I'm kind of doing like 3 things going on up there at one point in time. So this is all me up in the box while I'm sitting there and evaluating, watching, communicating to our offensive coordinator. So good question.
Gotcha. That's that's a lot. That's a lot to juggle.
Yeah, it is. It's quite a bit, and luckily we have a lot of counter space up there for me to be able to lay everything out.
Where's that kind of stuff that you picked up? Is that from your time with Lane Kiffin, or is that your NIU stuff, or is it just something you picked up somewhere else?
Honestly, this is a little bit more of the stuff that I've kind of been able to pick up. A lot of it was just kind of talking to our offensive coordinator too, and seeing, hey, what is the type of stuff that you really want to know? And talking to him, I've gone through like 3 or 4 different drafts of this, and this is the stuff he was kind of curious about. And I think that is the biggest thing that should dictate the information that you're giving. You want to be able to give information that the coach is going to feel is going to be pertinent to what they're doing. I think, again, we can get bogged down with so many different numbers and statistics and things like that, but what are the core roots of information that are important to our offensive coordinator? This is the stuff that he wants to know. This is kind of the reason that I made these selections.
What's the what's the biggest thing that you've taken after working at the FBS level? What's your biggest takeaway to the high school level?
Um, well, I think obviously the time management is going to be the biggest one. And at the FBS level, you're learning and you're able to see every minute detail is accounted for. You go back to those practice plans and you can kind of see that everything is organized to the minute. Um, and being able to apply that in a high school type setting. And I know that that's a really, really difficult thing. I mean, in the state of Wisconsin, I don't know very many coaches who have kind of been able to take advantage of that. I did get to listen to a presentation at our state clinic last year. We had one school who ended up really kind of getting the ball rolling. Fast-paced, up-tempo practices, really organized practice plan by the minute, being able to run, a play every 30 seconds, which was our goal at FAU, and being able to increase those types of things. Now that team did win a state championship this past year. I'm not going to say that's the reason why, but the time management piece is, I think, something that is really, really important and really big at the FBS level, but finding ways of being able to incorporate maybe components of that to a smaller college and high school level, I think are the biggest things that I'm still trying to figure out.
I can't remember who it was a few weeks ago, but I did an article on I think it was Kendall Briles talking about the importance of the first down in your drive.
Yeah,
Did you see that one?
I did see that one. Yes, I remember reading that one.
That kind of fits right into kind of a lot of the things that you're talking about. But as an offensive guy or as a play caller, how important getting that first down in your drive is. I wonder if that prompts more guys to script their plays, or just how they treat it differently in general.
Yeah.
If you're scoring on 83% of those, I think is what Kendall said that
Yep.
they've had over the years. That's impressive. It shows the importance of that first down.
Yeah, and I think being able to identify those, those P and 10 situations too, and what you're going to get in that type of situation. I mean, Coach Briles was down at FAU in 2017, and he was a big proponent of being focused on, first down in general. And being able to see, hey, a lot of our explosive plays came on first down. Now, the first few games, we struggled a little bit because we did have explosive plays on first down, but you have to find that blend of, if you're taking a shot every time, now you're in 2nd and 10. Now that leads to maybe some third down. So I think there's a blend of being able to figure out, hey, what's the point of being able to be efficient and being able to attack down the field? So I think there's a significant piece there to learn about and explore as well.
Yeah. So being a big numbers guy, are you a proponent of analytics on the sideline and letting that kind of drive if you are a big decision maker as a head coach or as a coordinator? Are you a proponent of analytics on the sidelines, or do you lean more towards the let coaches coach type line of thought?
Shockingly, I think that I'm a little bit more towards the let coaches coach type of thing. I think the analytics that I'm really interested in using are the stuff that you can accumulate before the game starts. So if your probability based off of your team says that you should go for it here, or that if you should go for 2 here, that's the type of stuff that I think is really good. But ultimately, when you're down on the field and you're thinking about everything that's going on over the course of a game, I think a lot of it is going to be a gut feeling, but having that frame in mind, and that's where I think numbers are really important. But you also need to, honestly, Colin Cowherd says this probably the best I've ever heard. Like, the concept of manalytics, I think, is really important. You have your concepts, your things that you're thinking about. The numbers are just to be able to check for understanding and be able to evaluate. They'll tell you what's happened in the past and they help you predict towards the future. But football comes down to a couple gut calls that you have to make as a human being. And I think those are the areas where you can take your educated guess that you learn before the game starts, but ultimately it's all you during the game making the decisions.
Analytics. I don't think I've heard that one before. That's a good one. But a coach and I were talking about this yesterday. Analytics don't. I think some coaches use them as a crutch in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I don't think analytics can't give you a feel for the flow of the game and what's been successful that game if it's stuff that's coming beforehand. So
Yep.
interesting to hear a numbers guy's perspective on that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time to join us, Coach Peterson. That's
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Doug.